There we go. I feel like we should have somebody in the background going, "You're live."
Exactly.
Hi,
Exactly.
Gina. How are you?
Hey, Pam. Great to see you.
Great to see you. I'm so glad you're here today for this conversation because you and I share a ton in common, which we'll touch on. But first, I want to introduce you to everybody who's going to be listening to this either live or on the replay. If you are, be sure and drop a comment in here, especially if you know us from the Angela Lauria author incubator world. We love you guys. We're always thinking of you. So that's how we first met, which we'll touch on. But let's talk about Gina. First of all, she uses a bad word in her bio, but I'm going to use it because we're actually going to talk about it. So I'm going to put my glasses on. But Gina's a fractional CFO for high growth CEOs. They're looking to scale and increase the value of their businesses. She's sometimes referred to as the CEO's Swiss Army knife. There's another little something we have in common we'll have to talk about. And for good reason. She's got 20 years of experience working with businesses and leading them, and is amazing at integrating business development and operations. So this is how I got to know Gina. And it's amazing how important the work she does is to somebody who's a CFO in an organization as well. And she currently lives near Tucson, Arizona, much nicer weather than we're having on the East Coast. And she's recently co-founded a co-working space, which I'm really interested in learning more about, especially in COVID times, like how that's had an impact on that. And it's called La Suprema Works and Events. She's authored 2 amazing Amazon bestsellers, one of which I have here. She sent me the other one, a couple of them, and I've already handed them all out to other people to read. But this is the original, Tandem Leadership, which got my attention for good cause. And there's another story behind that book. And the second book is called, it cut off here, but what is the total title of the second book?
Second one's Changing Lanes, and it's
Changing Lanes.
It's an entrepreneur's guide to exiting their business.
Awesome. And it's interesting. I think we can even start on that because every entrepreneur, when we talk to them like early on and talk about exit, it's like, I don't want to exit my business. I just started my business. And it's one of those things that's so important to know about, even if you don't ever plan to leave your business. Building towards a value is always important. And that's like when you start to work with an entrepreneur around exit, do they resist that term?
Yeah, they do. And actually there's a lot of research about exit planning. It's like funeral planning, right? To a lot of people. Right? What's interesting about people exiting their business is that, the top reason that somebody leaves their business is because of they get an unsolicited offer, or there's some sort of family or health emergency. And
okay.
Neither one of those are really planned. They're something you can plan for.
That really is true.
And so there's something to be said for knowing what your value is, even if you plan to never sell. Like a good friend of mine always says, I run my business like I could sell it tomorrow, but I never want to, right?
I love that. And I like the way you talk about the 2 ways that people can often get surprise exits to their business. And the first one, actually, there's a prevention for, and it's if something happens to you and you're, and you are the business when you're just starting out, and it's misogynistically called key man insurance, right. But it's basically an insurance policy on you as the owner. And what you want to do, and the reason the word exit is so important, is you want to make that value what your business is going to give to you over time. And that's really what we're talking about. All exit value is kind of accelerating that and saying, if this business were to make this kind of money for the next 20 or 30 years, what would it be worth today? So that you're insured enough to continue to go on, even if something happened to you. So that's the saddest thing that can happen. But I find it's interesting. I often try and find different words for exit, just like I try and find different words for fractional. So you are a fractional COO and I'm a fractional CFO, and we both hate that title and that word.
Yeah, I think it was because some CPA somewhere probably came up with
it probably was.
It probably sounded so mathy, right? So
yeah. Well, it feels like you just split up into pieces, and like I think both you and I really, when we're going to embed in a company or work with a company, like you called yourself the CEO's Swiss Army knife. I call myself the CEO's friend in the foxhole. because it's not just my leg that's in there with you. It's not just my hand that's in with the other one. We're in it with you as the business owner. And that word fractional, I just hate it, but it is the one thing that people seem to understand.
The way I look at it, I agree with you, because today it was interesting. I was on a call with a client this morning, and it's a newer client. And I said, I say we a lot when we have conversations.
Yep, me too.
Okay, so one of the things that we're going to need to do is get this business development plan in place. And I had to stop myself, and I said, hey, I need you to understand that I always say we because I feel intimately involved in your business, as if I was there all the time. And so I'm always going to say we because I believe that this is a journey that we're going on together. And he said, I totally get it. And I said, I know. I just wanted to make sure that we're clear. It's not like I'm talking down to you. But I think the way that I look at that fractional part is the reason I don't mind it sometimes is that if you have a small part of a really great resource, it's better than having a whole of a terrible resource.
Nicely put. I like that. And I think that's what happens a lot too. And I think maybe you find the same thing as I do. I don't know, but I find that people don't realize just how much how much they're putting up with from, in my case, bookkeeping and accounting in a lot of cases. And a big part of the education is, look, you run and own this business. You've got a right to a whole different level of service than you're getting right now. And you need, if you're going to be able to take this thing and run with it the way, I often talk about working with insane entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are insane. And that's part of what I love about them, right? Because they're just off doing things left and right. And my job is to keep up with them. And as soon as I catch up, they're on to the next thing. And that's the fun part of it. You don't ever get bored. But on the other hand, they don't often establish for themselves the right to get service levels from some of these kind of key administrative things like finance. Do you find the same thing in operations?
Well, I find it for sure in finance because I'm doing the same thing on the finance side. I'm always trying to encourage people to up-level their financial support, both bookkeeping, tax, and financial advising, CFO advising, because for that exact same reason. I think whenever on the operations side, I find the same thing because I think where people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, or early stage CEOs, they're deep sometimes in one area, specifically in the business. And so the areas that they don't feel as strong a confidence, which often are financials for sure. And they also can be in sales, it could be in marketing, it could be in execution. They feel like, oh, I don't really have the right to get the right information. Oh, it's got to be me, especially women on
Bingo. Yeah, it's got to be me.
It's got to be me.
I must be too demanding.
Or I just don't understand and I can't ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And, and I've seen enough people in my career where I've had to help coach them how to ask the better questions.
Yeah.
They had the right questions. They just either didn't press the resource enough for them or they didn't ask a follow-up question, right? They just took the first question at face value. And I always say, if you don't understand what they're talking about, that's not your fault.
Bingo.
It's their job to give you the information that you need. You're paying them.
In your language, whatever that language is, it's so true. And you hit on something else there too, because I remember, we both work with entrepreneurs that range from, 6 figures to 9 figures. We've had our experience with all of them. But the one thing I can say about entrepreneurs is a lot of them will actually say, hey, I don't know anything about finances. I hate accounting. I don't do math, whatever it is. But what I've found is if somebody's been running a business for a period of time, they know the answers. It's in their gut. They can scribble something on the back of a napkin and they're going to be about right. So a lot of what I do is nothing other than translating whatever the books are saying into their language. Like for one client, in fact, a fellow client, we both know Angela. She was a client for a little while, and I actually created a line called Angela's Shit on the P&L because she had money to experiment with new things every quarter. And I said, well, what is it? She goes, well, it's my shit. And I said, okay, cool. We're calling it Angela's Shit. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. Talking the language of the entrepreneur. And what I found was She knew everything about her business and the money in her business. She just used different terminology for it. So that's the other thing.
Sure. Yeah. And I think also they know when something's wrong.
Yep.
Like they know when something's wrong, but they can't do the forensics to figure it out. So they know that there's a problem in the organization, staffing wise, for example, would be a great example. They know that something's not translating correctly, or they're not getting the right information. They got this gut feeling and they don't really understand how to get there. And so a lot of times it's I think it's empowering them to figure out, to say, hey, you can do this, this, and this, or you and I can work together and start putting some systems in place that can operationalize it. Like the client that I'm working with today, that I worked with this morning at length, we've done some deep sessions. He wants to take a sabbatical this summer. His family's at a certain time. His partner is doing a job switch. They want to do some different things. And so I'm like, this is an awesome time to let your team rise up. You've got a great deadline. Urgency is
an love it.
It's what I don't know if this happened to you, but last spring when COVID hit, a lot of folks all of a sudden had the reason to get some of the stuff done that I've been bugging.
I should have been cleaning this up all along.
But all of a sudden when you really have to do it, and it's so amazing that by doing some of the things that we're going to do, by getting some things in place, automatically you have a more valuable business, which ties back to how we kick this off, right? The more valuable your business is the less engaged you are with the delivery of service.
Yes.
Right? And you can document things, and you can show a prospective buyer or a banker, or a vendor, or somebody that's, like when I first started, when I was in my very first company, we were really little. So we actually had huge vendors because of we had to demonstrate that we knew what we were doing.
Otherwise they wouldn't work with you.
Us. So it's not just the customers that sometimes you have to impress. Sometimes it's your vendors that you have to impress, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, with all the companies that I know I've worked with, a lot of times they just want to see a strong financial statement. And it really is actually sort of troubling, because if you give them a set of financials that actually balance, they don't so much care what's in them as they care that you've got them.
Exactly.
Which really blew my mind. Like there was one company we were going for some emergency financing for. We had everything had been secured already. I mean, there was nothing left to put a lien against. And I packaged up this. It was so much more form than function. I mean, it had the data in it, but if you really looked at the data, it was not a great story. Like you were taking a risk to make this loan. And they did it. And they did it without, I know they didn't look into those numbers because they would have asked questions. So this kind of stuff, I mean, then I don't think most banks do that. This one was just a little crazy, but it worked and they got paid back and it all worked out. But I don't know that I would have lent that money. But here today, I mean, now to couple that form with the function and knowing that you've got good, strong numbers, all of a sudden when you walk in, you're ready to sell your business. People come to the table differently. They come to the table quickly. They get, the minute they poke at your financials and there's a problem, all the trust goes off the table and you lose your negotiating position. But if they come in and poke at those financials, or they poke at operations and it's solid, it holds up, all of a sudden it's like, okay, these guys have credibility. I don't have a leg to stand on in trying to poke holes in their stuff. And buyers will try to take advantage of, especially big buyers will try to take advantage of family businesses.
For sure. I mean, I explain to people that most people only own one, maybe two businesses. If you're not a serial entrepreneur, the people that are purchasing your companies most of the time have owned multiple businesses, or they've purchased multiple businesses. If there's some sort of acquire, either within a corporate setting, like some large company that's buying folks, or somebody that's in M&A that's buying up folks, they know how to pull your financials apart to understand what the true value of the business is.
Right.
You have to be as smart as they are. And the only way you are is to make sure that you set your business up so that somebody who was on the outside would look at it and would be able to ascertain quickly, right? Because they may pay you exactly what you want, and your business may be worth way more than that.
Exactly. It's like one of those, I remember when we sold our first house, And like we put a price in the paper and we got it. I'm like, and like in 3 days, I'm like, well, we screwed that up.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Right?
I hate that.
The most amazing house. And if there's not a buyer on the market for
Right.
it, it doesn't matter.
Oh my God, that's so spot on. So going back to when we met, and I don't know if I think I've told you this story, but I might not have. Back, I think it's 2016 or 2017.
2016.
2016, yeah. So long story, but I met Angela Lauria, who's our mutual publisher, because I happened to be listening to a podcast one night in the hospital at 2 a.m. when my mother had a broken leg. And she was out on happy drugs, and I was listening to a podcast, and somebody had interviewed Angela. And she said at that interview, hey, if you're interested, just shoot me an email at this address, in very practical Angela style at that time. So I shot her an email at 2 a.m. I got an answer back at 2:05 in the morning.
Well, she never sleeps.
Not a robot answer. It actually said, hey, I really love the way your company name reflects your last name. And, what did you like about the podcast? And we started this odd email conversation at 0 hour in the morning. So anyway, I ended up working with her as a publisher. And the first time I submitted first of all, I thought I was writing something totally different. And we fixed that in the first conversation. Because, you're not writing about how people leave corporate and come into entrepreneurship. You're writing finance for entrepreneurs. I said, okay, fine. Sent her my first chapter, got a note back, said, hey, this is great. Perfect. This is exactly what we want. You're on fire. So I wrote the rest of the book like over the period of time, and I sent it in to her all proud. And I got a call from her. She goes, this is crap. And I'm about to walk out into my backyard and throw it in the bonfire. She goes, it reads like an accounting textbook. She goes, what you need to do is go read Gina's book and write me a book like that. And I said, okay. And I think I called you and said, hi, I'm going to write a book like yours. And you were just so amazingly helpful with me going through this. And it changed everything. By the time I sent her the second copy, she said, yep, this is more like it. We're good to go. So I don't know if you ever do that.
No, the thing I remember the second part, but I remember the first part too. And I think when you picked up the book, you must have emailed me, and that was right around when my book came out, because I think you were like in the next group, right?
Yep.
So it was right after my book had come out, because I was supposed to publish in June and I published in July, and so my book was right at coming. So you were one of the first people that emailed me directly and about my book, that you had read it and said, hey, by the way, could I, and I had a blog, and you were like, can I want to promote can I take your blog and put it on my website? And I'm like, I was so excited. And then I found out that Angela had referred you. And then I was even, I was still excited that she had referred you to my book.
But it wasn't out of the cold.
It wasn't a total random one, because that's what you're looking for, right?
And I remember the first time a stranger that hadn't been referred, said, hey, I read your book and that's why I'm calling. I was like, whoa, I really am an author. Like you are, and you did it and you did the work, but I forget about it a lot. But your book actually resonated with me before Angela told me to. I saw your book because I went to the castle where we were doing the books, and this was on the wall, was one of the plaques on the wall. And I thought it was interesting. So I asked about it. So the reason I actually read the book wasn't because she told me to, like that. She told me to later for a different reason. But I had always thought of myself as a number two in corporate. Like there was the CEO, I was the CFO. When there was a CFO, I was the controller. And I really focused on serving that person like as well as you could in the role, and was loving that somebody recognized that's a real relationship that's important to get right as an entrepreneur. You have to make sure your chief operating officer or your chief financial officer is somebody like that you can go into battle with, and they have your back. And it's just such a great recipe for that. That's why, that was the why.
And that comes back to, well, there's a couple things that come to mind. I don't know if you know this, but COOs are like the only C-suite function that doesn't have like a conference or a magazine or an association.
Really?
Yeah. There's no COO today. There's all the other,
wow, we got like 100.
Yeah. And if you're a chief, marketing officer or you're in IT, they all
Yep.
have these because they're very specific. And the CEOs, the generalist COO is all based on who the CEO is, right? So like if you have a financial CEO, you're going to have, you won't have a financial number two. You might have a operational or a marketing based one or a sales based one. If you're a very sales marketing CEO, which a lot of them are, you're going to have a financial or operations COO. It's like it's the yin and the yang. It's bringing them together.
It's a really good point. It's the gap filler for each individual CEO.
Yeah, and and so I think a lot of people don't realize it. And I think for early stage businesses or startups, the struggle that they have a lot of times is that they have this super amazing, entrepreneur founder that is good at everything, truly everything at the beginning. And there's things they don't like to do, but they can do it. But as they scale, they add people to their team, and the gap between them and the next set of people becomes
it's a different set of skills once you start to build that team out.
It is.
I mean, no matter what.
Yeah. And you need somebody that can go toe to toe with you, which a lot of times you don't have. Your team will do things because you tell them to do it, but you didn't tell them to do it exactly right.
Yes.
And so, And so it kind of implodes. And then, or you start having a revolving door because you keep hiring the same kind of people, or you think you're fixing one thing. And so, I found that there's you have to have knowledge transfer. You have to have a really orderly way to transfer the knowledge out of your head and transfer the responsibility when the person's ready to do it.
Yeah, you got to give the authority with the responsibility. That's the hardest part, is you have to give away, and entrepreneurs have built their baby, and it's very hard to do that, which is why that relationship's so important to build. A lot of time people create their COO from inside the organization, because they've come up through the organization, really learning everything everywhere from the ground up. And that makes them an incredibly valuable right hand, because they've been there with you from the beginning. You know them, you trust them, and they know the organization. But they don't often have the skill sets to actually then take and build out the department. And that's where I think it's so important to know there's a way to do that makes it so much more efficient for any size company. This doesn't mean that we're laying like this massive amount of bureaucracy on top of a small entrepreneur. The cool thing I think about what we can do is we can take all the best stuff from Fortune 500, strip away all the bureaucracy, strip away all the stuff that made us crazy in corporate, and then give a nice redesigned agile form of the same thing that has all the benefit without all the restrictions.
It's not that complicated. I think we look for a lot of complexity. It does become more complex the more people you have, but it's basically just, for me, it's like, do you know what your vision is? Can you articulate it? Can we put a simple plan in place, and can we put accountability inside of it so that everybody understands what they're supposed to be doing? I think that's why people, as entrepreneurs, will gravitate towards a system. Like they'll either go after like the EOS from Traction, or they'll go after like Clockwork, or they'll go out, they love these systems because they think they'll just follow it to the letter. But what they don't understand is that you have to have the intentionality behind everything. And they have to turn into the person that's used to being in a system like that.
And they usually are the bottleneck because they can't be in that system. That's not what got them where they are, which is why the COO can separate them from that. Because if the COO handles that in the organization and leaves the CEO in the visionary role, then it works brilliantly.
Yeah. I think, and you have to know where you're going. There's a thing called, in exit planning, when I do my value builder stuff, we talk a lot about push-pull. And you have push reasons to make decisions, and you have pull reasons to make decisions. At the end of your business life, or when you're ready to sell your business or move on or change positions, if there's not enough pull reasons for you to leave your business, you will tank the deal at the table before the deal gets to the table, because there's nothing for you to do afterwards. Right? So I love this. I'm like, oh, I want to play. This is like a lot of things I'll hear. I'm like, oh, I'm going to play golf more. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to travel more. I'm going to go visit my grandchildren more, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to play, I'm going to whatever they're going to do.
Yep.
And I'm like, how much of that are you doing now? Like zero. And
Yep.
so if you're not doing any of that stuff, it's not like you can turn a switch
Right.
and do it. Start doing that stuff now. Create this life that you want. And if you create the life you want now that has a business and you can do that, you may find that your business is not as annoying as you think it is.
There you go. Yep. As long as you balance it and do the stuff you love to do. And one of the things too, to doing it the other way that you described, and I've seen this happen, incredibly successful entrepreneurs, they get everything they dreamed of. The business is what it is. They exit it. And then they have this massive success hangover. Mm-hmm. And they're miserable because there's no new challenge. Because when you're running a business, it's all the time, every day, chaos. And whether we like it or not, we get addicted to the adrenaline. And then once it's over, they just kind of collapse. Now, what I like so much better than that is what you just described. Let's learn how to be the calm, centered, very aligned CEO in our business that isn't driving everybody crazy and isn't whiplashing the entire organization every 5 minutes. And that's harder than it sounds.
Well, I think you're depleted, right? I think you're really depleted. And so people make some really dramatic decisions sometimes because they're really depleted. And what they really, it's not, they're like, I have to get out of this business. It's making me crazy. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about what's making you crazy. And then we start pulling it apart and they're like, oh, I really just don't like doing this anymore. It's not exciting me. And once we start pulling it all apart, we can find, yes, you may still want to leave, but I say as many times as not, people aren't ready to leave.
They just change their role a little bit.
Change their role and get excited about it and get excited about their life, right? I think that's where it's so interesting. I think that's where all the coaching, there's a tactical part, but then there's just the plain old, I need someone to talk to about this stuff that actually understands my business.
And that isn't an employee or a contractor that's relying on me for their livelihood, basically. So what right now is your ideal client? Are you looking to help 6-7 figure businesses? Where are you targeting so that I can, we can work on trying to make some connections in the group?
So right now, my companies, I'd say for the most part, are all from less than $1 million to 10 million.
Okay, got it.
I've had bigger clients. I've had smaller clients. They're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to move the needle in their business. And they're like, there's a gap in their leadership team to fill. And they need someone that can actually help them take this, what I want, and put it into some sort of execution that's actually going to work this time. I hear that a lot. This time I hear a lot. And, and most of them have scaling, they have scaling ideas, but they're stuck. They are just stuck for some reason.
So scaling, a leadership gap, and recurring pain points are kind of the three keys. Yeah. Okay. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to follow up, Gina?
They can go to my website, Gina, venturesolutions.com, venturesolutionsus.com.
Drop that in here. Hang on. HTTPS, Venture Solutions. What was the last part?
US.com.
US.com. All right. Drop that in the comments.
Yep. There's a contact form on there and they can just go ahead and reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn and they can do that as well. So
what's your third book going to be?
I've actually want to do a little ebook about some of the common pitfalls, like a quick handbook on the common pitfalls and some brainstorm ways for people to deal with it when they're in this netherworld of not having that other executive on their team.
Oh, I like that. I've decided I want to write a second one. I haven't told Angela that I need to do that. I want to write a second one, but I don't know what it is yet. So I have to talk to her to have her tell me what it is. Because I know it's in here. I just don't know exactly what the right, which way to angle it.
There are so many books you could write, Pam, seriously.
I could write about dogs, that's for sure. We thought we'd actually write a little comic book about Diego. So that we do too. My pup, my cute little Bernedoodle pup. But that may be the next one. Angela, if you're watching, we're gonna have to actually tap that and take care of it. I love it. Well, Gina, thanks so much for taking the time today. This has been amazing to catch up with you. I always love it when we have a conversation.
Oh, thanks so much. It's so great to check in with you too, Pam. I appreciate it.
Cool. And whether you're watching this live or on the replay, thanks so much for tuning in. Gina is an awesome resource if you're dealing with leadership gaps or a scaling issue, or you just keep getting the same repeated problems happening over and over and over again in your organization. And she's a rock star at this stuff, folks. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you all later. Happy, I think it's a Wednesday, right? Or is it Thursday? No, it's Wednesday. Have a great Wednesday evening, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Take care.